The armies of the Second World War were among the largest in history. Given their staggering size and complexity, we often have trouble wrapping our heads around them. This chaos is given some sense by abstracted diagrams and tables of organization. However, in doing so, we lose the relatable and the human side of these organisms of war. From their breakout in the parade ground to their march in the fields, their attack formations, and their defensive emplacements. So today, let us begin to build our understanding with the true size of an American Rifle Company in 1944.
You can join another major branch of the Armed Forces through our sponsor World of Warships. World of Warships is a free-to-play game available on the PC that places you in the role of a naval commander. Choose from a range of fleet assets including history's most iconic battleships, destroyers, aircraft carriers, cruisers, and submarines to dominate 12v12 arena matches across more than 40 unique maps with stunning water effects, dynamic weather, and exhilarating combat. Gameplay stays fresh with new content added every month in the form of in-game nations, ship classes, vessels, and cosmetics. This month only, you can go to battle as characters from Azure Lane and show off your favorite characters with the new Azure Lane themed skins. World of Warships has a passionate community, which you can join not just in-game, but on the forums and in Discord, where you can find all the latest news and participate in tournaments to truly test your mettle. You can get in on the action across numerous platforms including PC, consoles, and more. So get started today by downloading the game using the link in the description. Enjoy a starter pack when you register and use the code Azure555 to get additional rewards that include 500 doubloons, 2.5 million credits, 5 days of premium account time, 1 premium container, and both commanders, Cheshire and Azuma. Enjoy!
The United States military of the Second World War was an enormous, complicated organization. Between 1940 and 1945, the United States Army alone fielded 91 divisions. Of these, the vast majority, 68 divisions, were infantry divisions, made up of over 14,000 men apiece. But in order to understand such larger units, let us build up to our understanding of the Army organization from the ground up. At the base of the pyramid would be your regular soldier. Between 1940 and 1945, 11.26 million personnel would serve wearing Army green. Contrary to military propaganda, these were not all eager volunteers. 70% were conscripted. From 1940 to 1942, most officers were reservists who had been called up to provide command and control for this newborn behemoth. At the same time, the pre-existing US National Guard, which acted as the military arm of local state government, was levied and sent overseas to join the war effort. First for 12 months, but later their service was extended as the United States found itself stretched thin on 2 fronts. By February of 1942, the Army stopped allowing volunteers because volunteers could choose their branch, and the Army wanted more control over where manpower went, because most men did not want to go into the infantry. The infantry was a dangerous and unpopular branch. Up until 1942, only about 5% of volunteers chose the infantry. As a result, most enlisted infantrymen in any division were not there by choice. Well into 1944, Army ground forces got a disproportionate share of lower quality conscripts. At about 5 foot 7 inches and under 140 pounds, the average infantryman was even smaller and lighter than the average soldier. This would change somewhat in late 1944 and early 1945. As thousands of infantrymen were maimed, killed, or mentally broken, the Army desperately needed replacements. New riflemen could be former anti-aircraft gunners, former air cadets, or skilled civilian professionals. No matter how he got there, an infantryman was there for the duration of the war. Only death or serious injury could send a man home early. Yet, despite these risks, such servicemen were poorly compensated in terms of both salary, bonus, and life insurance. On the march with a fully loaded pack, an infantryman usually had to lug about 50 pounds of equipment. But before going into the attack, he usually left his pack, shelter half, and other items in the rear. When going into combat, a soldier wore 10 to 20 pounds of clothing and carried about 20 to 30 pounds of field equipment. For a hasty meal, he had D-ration chocolate bars, bland K-rations, and 2 canteens of water. The M1 rifle carried by most infantrymen weighed nearly 11 pounds fully loaded. It was effective out to about 500 yards. The bayonet added another pound and a half. One man in every squad carried the Browning automatic rifle, or BAR, which weighed nearly 21 pounds. Most riflemen also carried the 1.3-pound Mark II pineapple grenade, which could optimistically be thrown about 30 yards. In his cartridge belt, an infantryman carried 80 rounds in 10 clips. Combat veterans often carried additional ammunition in 2 cloth bandoliers with 48 rounds in each bandolier. With a fully loaded belt and 2 bandoliers, a rifleman carried 176 rounds, over 13 pounds of ammo. With the basic soldier thus defined, let us now see how they come together to fight according to the 1944 Table of Organisation. The smallest unit was the Rifle Squad, composed of 10 privates led by a staff sergeant and his assistant sergeant. Within the squad, we have divided the general roles given by the infantryman's field manual into 4 teams plus their commanders. The first team was composed of the barman, the assistant barman, and the bar ammunition bearer. Teams such as this only existed at the beginning of the Second World War due to mounting deaths and a chronic manpower shortage. The bar team was more often a single man. The next team we've identified is the Grenadiers. They were armed with M1 Garands and the M7 grenade launcher, which was capable of launching smoke grenades and anti-tank grenades. Due to the ongoing manpower shortage, the third team, the Scouts, often didn't exist at all. Riflemen who showed skill or drew the short straw were assigned scouting duties if and when the squad needed them. Otherwise, these men acted as standard riflemen. Compared to other Western powers, Americans had unusual rifle squads. A German Gruppe usually had 9 to 10 men and a belt-fed machine gun. A Commonwealth Rifle Section had 10 men and a Bren gun. US Army rifle squads had a dozen men armed with semi-automatic rifles and 1 automatic rifle. This was because the Army's infantry branch had a strong preference for tactics based on the rifleman's mobility and morale. So, rather than burden men with a hefty machine gun, the infantry branch opted to keep the World War I era BAR and give soldiers the M1 Garand, a semi-automatic rifle which doubled their firepower. Of course, while the rifle was the most numerous weapon in a rifle company, it was seldom the most effective. However, one major drawback of the American system was that the large squads had a command and control problem, as some squad leaders struggled to manage 11 other men in the chaos of combat. During the reforms of 1947, the Army cut it back to a 9-man squad. Rifle squads rarely acted alone. On the move, the squad watched and secured its part of the formation. On the defense, a squad held its sector of the line or was held back in reserve. On the attack, they used fire and maneuver, supported by and supporting their sister squads. One of the few solo actions for a squad was patrolling, since a squad or half squad was relatively handy and stealthy. Patrols might be done to investigate suspicious activity in front of the lines or to snatch a prisoner for interrogation. Patrolling was often done at night, with soldiers carrying little more than small arms, bayonets, and grenades. Next up would be the rifle platoon, composed of 3 rifle squads. Their platoon HQ would be composed of a platoon commander, a platoon sergeant, and a platoon guide, who were supported by 2 messengers. An aide man was attached from the battalion medical section to act as a combat medic. The platoon also had one scoped M1903A3 Springfield sniper rifle, which could be given to the platoon's best shot. As the platoon's only officer, the lieutenant had ultimate responsibility for it. His binoculars, radio, and helmet rank insignia made him a prime target for snipers, so savvy officers hid these markers. If the platoon leader fell, his platoon sergeant had to step up. As the most senior and most experienced soldier in the platoon sergeant was a crucial advisor and mentor to the platoon leader. His assistant, the platoon guide, prevented straggling and handled ammunition resupply. Infantry officers could come from West Point, the Reserve Officer Training Corps, ROTC, battlefield commissions, or they could be transferred from another branch. But by 1944, the majority of infantry platoon leaders were graduates of Infantry Officer Candidate School, OCS, in Fort Benning, Georgia. This OCS produced nearly 63,000 lieutenants during the war. Only about 65 to 75% of a typical infantry OCS class would graduate. A second lieutenant fresh out of OCS had to convince his men that he wasn't an incompetent 90-day wonder who was going to get them killed. To do his job well, a platoon leader had to take extra risks. He had to expose himself to spot for mortar fire. He had to creep from foxhole to foxhole every night to check on his men. On the attack, he had to embody the infantry's motto, "Follow me," and put himself at the decisive point of action. These young officers paid the price. In the last half of 1944, 30% of the platoon leaders in some divisions were killed or wounded. In other units, the losses had been even worse. The next important building block of the US Army Infantry Battalion was the Weapons Platoon. It was composed of 1 light machine gun section, 1 mortar section, and a platoon HQ. Let's take a closer look at each of these. The basic unit of the mortar section is its mortar squad. It is composed of 4 privates first class or privates who are led by a sergeant. Unlike the Heavy Weapons Company, the mortar squads of the Heavy Weapons Platoon were armed with 60mm light mortars, which weighed 42 pounds. Each mortar shell weighed 3 pounds, and a squad could carry 36 to 48 rounds in special 12-round vests. The M2 60mm mortar fired explosive, white phosphorus, and flare shells. The maximum range with the 3-pound explosive shell was 1,985 yards. The sustained rate of fire was 18 rounds per minute, with a max rate of 30 to 35 rounds per minute. Supplying the mortars with shells was a constant problem, since a squad could fire off all its ammunition in less than 2 minutes. 3 mortar squads together form a mortar section for a total of 15 men, commanded by a staff sergeant who was assisted by a messenger. The basic unit of the light machine gun section was a squad of 5 men. It was composed of 3 privates led by a sergeant. The 31-pound M1919A4 and its 14-pound tripod were just light enough to be quickly redeployed. The air-cooled Browning lacked a quick-change barrel and had to be fired in short bursts, limiting its effective rate of fire to about 40 to 150 rounds per minute. although the gun could be fired faster in emergencies. A fully loaded squad carried about 1,250 rounds in 250-round belts, with another 3,500 rounds on their jeeps. The gunner, or number 1, carried the tripod and deployed it so the gun could be mounted for him to fire. The assistant gunner, or number 2, carried the gun on the move and helped load it during action. The number 3 and the other ammunition bearer carried ammunition and passed it forward. 2 LMG squads together formed a light machine gun section for a total of 10 men, commanded by a staff sergeant who was assisted by a messenger. The light machine squad was vital for maintaining fire superiority. On the attack, gunners suppressed enemy positions. On the defense, machine guns engaged the largest or most dangerous concentrations of enemy troops. Whenever possible, both guns were used on the same target to maximize results. In combat, the section leader selected and assigned locations for the squads, assigned sectors of fire, and ensured that the machine guns remained resupplied. The squad leader selected the exact firing position, observed and adjusted fire, enforced fire discipline, and ensured his ammunition bearers kept his crew resupplied with ammunition. These 2 sections were rolled up into a weapons platoon, whose HQ was led by a platoon commander and a platoon sergeant, who were assisted by 2 messengers and 2 drivers. The drivers drove 2 jeeps towing trailers. The weapons platoon was the only platoon in the rifle company with organic motor transport. The 2 jeeps and trailers could carry ammunition or rapidly move mortars and machine guns to a critical point on the battlefield. 1 jeep mounted a 50 caliber machine gun. The weapons platoon and 3 rifle platoons would be joined into a rifle company. Each had a pre-selected name, from Able to Love, based on their parent battalion. The company HQ would be rather large given its administrative role and boasted around 35 men. The company HQ had a pool of 5 bazookas that could be issued at the company commander's discretion. At the end of June 1944, the Army applied the hard lessons of battles like Saipan and Normandy and added automatic firepower to this pool. 6 M3 grease guns, or 6 Thompson submachine guns, and 6 BARs. Company commanders typically gave a bazooka to each platoon and kept one at HQ. The automatic weapons were given evenly to each rifle platoon or saved and given to fighting patrols or assault teams. As for the HQ itself, the CO held the rank of captain and was likely an officer in the National Guard or the reserves before he was called up to active duty. He was supported by the company executive officer, who was typically a first lieutenant, and the company first sergeant. The command element also contained a communications section, a supply section, a mess section, and a collection of basic duty privates who acted as general laborers and replacements for frontline troops. The company commander had a heavy burden to bear. He might have been still in his 20s or 30s, but he was still the old man. His task was to execute the missions given to him by battalion. He might be ordered to take ground or to hold it against enemies trying to take it. He had to position his platoons effectively. He had to destroy the enemy with his company's weapons and his fire support. And he had to keep over 190 soldiers armed, fed, motivated, and alive. Thankfully, he had help. The captain might have commanded the company, but the first sergeant ran it. As the most experienced enlisted soldier, the first sergeant was a key advisor, disciplinarian, and assistant. To allow the company commander to focus on command, the XO helped manage logistics and admin. In the worst case, he could temporarily replace a fallen platoon or company commander. Every company commander issued orders. These could be spoken, written, or simply sketched on a map. Ideally, a company commander could speak face-to-face to his subordinates. But this obviously was not possible in many combat situations. It was at the company level where a crucial American advantage in communication technology came into play. Unlike most contemporary armies, the US Army also had a company-wide radio network. The company commander had 6 SCR 536 handy-talkie radios, enough to give one to each platoon leader and have 2 for himself. Although these temperamental radios had a range of just 1 mile, they still saved seconds and lives. To pass messages to battalion or his sister companies, the company commander was usually given an SCR 300 backpack radio. Now that we have rather exhaustively defined the elements of a rifle company, let's now put it into action with a few of its common formations. In this section, we'll look at the formations of a rifle company. In this case, Baker Company, 311th Infantry Regiment, 78th Infantry Division, better known as the Lightning Division. The first formation is a classic parade ground formation. Baker Company would have assembled like this for a roll call, a review, or an award presentation. At full strength, Baker Company could muster 193 soldiers, with 6 officers and 187 enlisted men. For illustrative purposes, we've placed most of the company HQ personnel in a separate formation. Doctrinally, they would have assembled with the weapons platoon or stood with other platoons to fill in for any men missing from the platoons. The second formation we'll consider is the march formation. When marching in open order in columns of 3s, Baker Company stretched out for about 120 yards. American infantry divisions seldom had enough trucks to move all their infantry, so most infantrymen marched while on campaign. Ordinary riflemen were expected to march at a pace of 3 miles an hour, with a 10-minute break every hour. In practice, this meant Baker Company could move about 2.5 miles per hour and could cover about 12 to 15 miles per day. The company commander, the first sergeant, and some communications personnel led the formation. The company's executive officer, other HQ personnel, and any vehicles brought up the rear to avoid throwing up dust in the faces of the marching men. Now, let's apply real formations to a fictional attack scenario. In combat, rifle companies used a variety of formations. As the 78th Division advances into Germany, it must secure high ground in its path. The task of taking it falls to Baker Company. Baker leaves the road and switches from column formation into an approach march formation. It will move to its assembly area near Hill 45. It will then prepare to cross the line of departure, or LOD, an imaginary line typically placed between friendly and enemy lines. This will start the attack. In anticipation of the attack, the company commander has decided to use the classic 2 up, 1 back formation and put his firepower up front. First platoon and second platoon take the lead. The captain has spread his heavy weapons and attached a 60mm mortar squad to each of the leading rifle platoons. The company HQ, 3rd platoon, and the remainder of the weapons platoon follow in support. One messenger from each platoon remains with the company HQ to carry messages back to their parent platoons. After reaching the assembly area, Baker Company deploys for its attack. 3rd platoon and the weapons platoon would deploy on Hill 45 and provide a reserve force and a base of fire with heavy weapons within about 1,000 yards. The company command post oversees the action as his troops begin to cross the LOD. When approaching or crossing the line of departure, platoon leaders usually choose one of 4 formations: platoon column, line of squads, or 1 forward, 2 back, or 2 forward, 1 back. 2nd Platoon's commander has also chosen to use a 2 up, 1 back formation. If he makes contact, he'll have enough firepower up front to respond to a threat, while also having an uncommitted force he can use for a flanking attack. In this formation, the platoon is about 100 to 150 yards long and has a frontage of about 100 yards. At this point, each squad is still in column, since columns are easier to lead and control. Each squad stays 50 to 75 yards from the others to stop them getting tangled with each other. The platoon leader and a messenger lead most of the platoon. The platoon sergeant and the aide man choose a convenient position in the middle of the formation. The platoon guide follows the platoon and pushes forward any stragglers. The scouts from each squad have been detached to move ahead of the platoon. Each scout stands 10 to 30 yards from his buddy, close enough to hear each other, but not close enough to get caught by the same grenade or burst of machine gun fire. Scouts could range up to 500 yards ahead of their platoon. The attack starts with supporting fire. 1st Battalion's Heavy Weapons Company walks 81mm mortar rounds along the length of the German position. Baker Company's own 60mm mortars and machine guns focus on suspected German machine gun nests. This suppressing fire keeps the Germans' heads down while 1st and 2nd Platoon advance across the line of departure. 1st Platoon deploys into a skirmish line about 150 yards long as it crosses the LOD and makes a frontal assault. 2nd Platoon makes a flanking assault. As the supporting fire lifts, 1st and 2nd Platoon attack and clear out the Germans with bullets and grenades. With both of Baker Company's initial objectives under control, the company commander wants to keep his momentum. He quickly moves up 3rd Platoon, the weapons platoon, and his command post. Through his binoculars, he's able to see a dug-in German platoon on Hill 73. He calls in fire supports from the battalion's 81mm mortars and directs his own weapons platoon to target the most dangerous German positions. On his order, all 3 platoons attack. While 1st and 2nd platoons fix the Germans with frontal attacks, 3rd Platoon is able to maneuver around the flank. As they draw closer, the support fire lifts and the attacking platoons clear the hill with rifles and grenades. The Germans will likely counterattack, so Baker Company needs to quickly prepare a defense. The dead and wounded are moved to the rear. Casualties are replaced by the basic duty privates from Company HQ. Ammunition is brought up by the battalion. The company commander now prepares to establish a line of defense to consolidate his gains for the day. 2 rifle platoons and the machine gun squads hold the first line of defenses. In this lightly wooded terrain, each rifle platoon occupies a frontage of about 150 yards. But, considering the range of their weapons, each rifle platoon can actually defend a frontage of 300 yards or wider. Accounting for the gaps between platoons, Baker Company occupies a frontage of roughly 450 yards, but controls almost 700 yards of the front. The other rifle platoon and the mortars are sighted further back. They remain within effective rifle range, 500 yards, to provide fire support, act as a reserve, and prepare a potential fallback position. Riflemen dig two-man foxholes deep enough to crouch or stand in. The weapons platoon digs positions large enough for a heavy weapon and its crew. For now, this will be sufficient as the sun begins to set. In this way, the US Army Rifle Company would slowly grind its way across the European theatre. Stay tuned for more episodes in our True Size series, where we seek to better visualize aspects of military history in 3D. Let us know below what topics you'd like to see us cover next, and consider supporting the channel on Patreon, where you can catch script previews, participate in polls, and get HD downloads of all our art. And to the researchers, writers, and artists for making this episode possible. We couldn't have done it without this team and this community. If you liked this episode, be sure to like and subscribe for more content, and check out these other related videos. See you in the next one.